So this is everything you need to know about a line marking paint machine. Let's get started. So this video will be covering all of the basics you need to know to get started on a Titan Powerliner 8955 paint machine. In this video, I'll be going through how to clean the machine, how to set up the machine, and how to operate the machine, plus touch on any sort of particular troubleshooting and issues you may come across on a normal day-to-day job. The machine has just come back from a job. It needs some TLC, so it will show us everything we need to know to operate this machine. This machine, like most other paint machines, has the ability to change the tips, meaning we can spray different width lines and different thicknesses of paints. First things first, gloves and glasses. We don't want to get any thinners in our eyes. Now, if you're in a space that's not as well ventilated, obviously we're outside, I'd always recommend wearing a mask, especially with solvent paints. But today we should be fine. First thing I check with a paint machine when getting set up on a job or back at the yard or flushing it out is that the fuel tank is filled up. It takes standard unleaded petrol because you don't want it cutting out halfway through your job. Now, this machine currently has yellow paint in it, purely for this demonstration, and we'll be going through how to flush the machine out first. So when filling, make sure the filter is left in. In the spirit of saving thinners and materials, we always flush the machine out, especially on the first time, with older thinners that have already been used. So I've got in the habit of letting as much paint fall out of the siphon tube as possible. This just means it's not going into the thinners, putting an unnecessary amount of paint into the thinners tub. Once we've got that in the thinners tub, we can swap the two over. So we make sure this is tightened up, the gun's tightened up before we start. We'll ensure that the hydraulic pump is turned off when we start the engine and that the revs are down. Make sure that the pressure is turned down and it should start. So the next step is to flush through the paint with thinners. To do this, again, we've made sure that the pump is turned down, the pressure's turned down. And then we turn the pump on once the hose is in the thinners tub. You'll notice the paint should start to come through quite slowly, and we can gradually turn the pressure up. Now as the thinners come through, it'll come through a lot faster. So we turn the pressure back down, pump a small amount through into the tub. We don't want to get too many thinners into the tin of paint. So then what we do is we pump back into the waste thinners tub. Now it's ready to cycle in the machine. Right, so now all the paint is diluted off of the hose and in the bucket. Give it one more flush out with some cleaner thinners to get the rest of it out of the system. So to do this, we basically repeat the process again. We drain the hose out, tip these thinners into the old thinners tub, and top the bucket up with some clean thinners. You want to check that there's not much sediment in there and all the paint has been dissolved. So this is the second flush. We're going to flush through the cleaner thinners into the dirty thinners tub, ready for the paint. You recirculate it back round in the tub now to clean off any last little bits. Now the next step is to ensure that the filters are cleaned out as well, because in the flushing process they can pick up some dirt. The first step is to lose all pressure in the machine. It doesn't have to be off, but we need to make sure the pump is turned off and all the pressure is out of the gun. So we'll turn the pump off, we'll turn the pressure down, and then release any pressure in the gun back into the tub. Now that that's done, we can unscrew the gun, inspect the filters, and look, some sediment and some paint that's been missed. Check for damage, there's no holes or splits, it's good to be reused. When taking out the gun filter, always make sure that the small spring at the bottom of the gun handle remains in place. If this is lost, you'll need to order a new one or replace with a spare. If you can't see it, just check by putting the filter in the hole, pushing down. So the short end in first and the long end pointing out. And to reattach, the long end goes into the gun and simply screws on. The second filter, the main filter, is in here. If this is too hard to get off, it's generally because the machine's still under pressure. So this should, with a bit of elbow grease, undo. got a small amount of yellow paint in there, to be expected. To clean this off, to double check for any dirt, we push the ball bearing up and you can see lots of small bits of sand, sediment, old paint and grit in there. To clean out, we just put our finger in there to lift the ball up and give it a good shake into some thinners. And now you can see it's all been washed out. We place this back into the machine. I always like to give the threads and the seals a wipe before placing the cap back on, just ensures a good seal and longer life for the seals. Now the next step after the machine is flushed is to put paint through the machine. Typically after a job the machine is always washed out, and overnight some more sediment can accumulate in the pipes, so we'd always flush it out before starting the job the next day. We've done 2 flushes, one to clean the machine and one to just get any smart last little bits out of the system. In this instance we wouldn't typically put paint straight back through the machine. For the purposes of this demonstration we're going to put paint back in the machine to show you how to get the pressures correct, how to flush paint back through the machine and how to set up the arm. So the next step is adding paint. So this machine, like most other paint machines, can spray a variety of different products and paints, from solvent based, water based and resin based. However, today we're going to be using a single pack epoxy supplied by our friends down at Meon, and it's going to be blue. Most of the products in this area of our workshop are essentially sprayable, which means they haven't got dangerous chemicals in them that can't get airborne, and they haven't got aggregates. At that end of the workshop we have some internal products, so 2-part polyurethanes and MMAs. Although MMAs aren't actually harmful, they have a lot of aggregate in them and we can't spray them through the machine because it will ruin the pumps and the seals. The 2-part polyurethanes, I believe, have isocyanates in them, so we have to be very careful, wear respirators and hand apply only. These ones, not so much. Same again, make sure the pump's off, pressure's down, revs are low, and start. So we've still got thinners in the tubes and we're ready to flush some paint through now. You get the air bubble come through and shortly after be followed by blue paint. Turn the pressure up a little bit. There we go, now we can pump that through into the tin. So it looks like that the paint's a little bit too thick and it's basically sucking up air bubbles. We'll thin it down with the correct thinners, which is a single pack epoxy thinners in this case. Obviously depending on the paint we use, depends on the thinners we use, but we mustn't use the cleaner. So we continue flushing through the blue paint until we get a nice even stream of paint. Just make sure that all the air bubbles are out. Once you're happy that all the air bubbles are out, flush it through for another minute or so, just to pick up any sediment that could have got lodged in the pipes. So you'll notice, if the pressure's too low, you'll get tram lines. To combat this, we turn the pressure up until the tram lines disappear, and it's an even pressure the whole way across. There we go. If you find the pressure gets too high and you can't turn it up any more and you've still got tram lines, it means the paint's probably too thick or too cold, so we need to thin it down a little bit. So now that the paint machine pressure and the gun is set up, we need to set up the spray arm. So let's drop it down. Tighten this one up. We bring this one all the way to the end and move the arm as close to the body as possible, so there's little vibration as possible. Make sure it's all tightened up, the cable isn't dragging along the floor, and we can attach the spray gun. Now on the Titan machines, unfortunately their guns aren't self-centering, so we need to make sure it's centered, and even when tightened up there is a small amount of play in the handle. If not, this means that the gun might get stuck on when we release the trigger. When doing this, I've got in the habit of always putting a bit of cardboard underneath the gun, just in case the trigger accidentally presses and we spray the floor. Now that the gun's set up, it should be nearly the correct height, but we need to check that the spray width is correct and that we're not getting tram lines. So I'll start the machine back up again and let's check that out. So I can tell by looking at this line it's probably a bit too wide. We'll double check with a tape measure and adjust the gun as required. So this line is 110 mil, we want it to be 100 mil. So we'll lower the gun ever so slightly towards the floor. So now we've lowered it, let's try it a second time and see if we've got the width correct. Yeah. So now the machine's set up, we've got the correct width line, we're ready to start spraying. Now we recommend you ping out a line and we're ready to spray. So now that we've completed the job and painted our blue line, it's now time to put the machine away. Basically, you just repeat the steps from the beginning. So take the tube out, flush thinners through twice, clean the filters and put the machine away. And then it's ready for next time.